Welcome to As a Matter of Faith, brought to you by Altered States, an online ministry dedicated to beginning each day with the good news of the gospel. I am your host, Preacher Bob. I'm finding that this is a much different country now than when I started out as a young preacher some 33 years ago. For one thing, I'm seeing an awful lot more violence in our country. Many of the larger cities in our nation are setting brand new records every day for the numbers of people who are shot and killed on their streets. Outside of actual wartime, it's unlikely that many of us have ever witnessed such a predilection for murder and mayhem. But even though there does seem to be a statistical uptick in the numbers, I don't know that this is really anything new. A quick read through the Old Testament shows us that humanity really does have a pretty violent side. For many of the ancients, as for many in certain strata of our contemporary society, life at its best was short, and death, often a very violent and brutal death, was an ever-present reality. Take, for instance, the ancient city of Nineveh. As the capital of the Assyrian Empire, Nineveh was known for violence like Nashville's known for country music. Assyria dominated a large portion of the Levant, including Israel. Assyrian soldiers had a habit of laying waste to whatever was in their path, subjugating and enslaving the people they didn't kill, torturing those who dared to resist, and deporting those whose influence they felt might spark some kind of a revolt. Now, needless to say, God wasn't all that pleased with their behavior, and so he sends the prophet Jonah to Nineveh with the message that in 40 days Nineveh is going to be destroyed. But now, as it turns out, Jonah wasn't all that happy about being tagged to deliver this message of doom. So he runs as far in the opposite direction as he could possibly go. Now, don't get the impression that this sudden departure for the uttermost parts of the earth is a sign of cowardice. Jonah wasn't a coward. He wasn't afraid of what the Ninevites would do for him. Rather, he believed they deserved to be destroyed, and what he was afraid of was that the folks would be moved to repentance when they heard his message. As for the Ninevites, they ultimately came to understand that despite the deadline that God had set, God was willing to relent and show mercy, and they took advantage of that, much to Jonah's dismay. Jonah disapproved of God's grace being shown to these enemies of God's people. Rather than rejoicing that the Ninevites saw the light and mended their ways, he just couldn't wait to rush to the top of a hill overlooking the city, waiting for that divine barbecue to take place. Jonah's attitude, unfortunately, is all too common in this time in which we live. God's grace, simply put, is about you and I not getting what we really deserve. This is how God's kingdom comes into the world. It's by such grace as this, and grace is found only in the person of Jesus Christ. God sent his Son in order to show us what God was really like. But for his trouble, humanity killed him. When God had every right to avenge Jesus' death in the most brutal way possible, he didn't. Instead of anger, God showed mercy. Instead of violence, God showed forgiveness. Instead of retaliation, God showed grace. Grace can't be won, it can't be earned, it can't be inherited. It's a free gift, and it's granted to all. Regardless of who we are, we enter into God's kingdom only by realizing that we really shouldn't be there at all. You might encounter someone today whose behavior makes you feel as though they don't deserve the grace of God. As a matter of faith, remember, you really don't either. So extend God's gift of grace to them just as freely as God has extended it to you.